Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled Karen demands I give her spoiled 15-year-old son my new car. When my wife and I refuse, Karen freaks out and slaps my beautiful wife. Here is how I retaliated. Let's dive right into the story. And the first one starts like this. So there is a Karen that, while living 2 doors down from me, I will call her my neighbor for simplicity. She also has earned the title of being called Karen because she seems to check almost every single box personality-wise. Now, look-wise, she does not radiate a typical Karen for the main reason that she is not white. My wife and I are Japanese, while Karen and her family are Korean. I don't care about what culture or religion or anything else people are. I am not blind, of course, and I notice it, but don't judge anybody because of it. Karen is the total opposite and seems to hate us just because we are Japanese. I've heard her talking to her son about how we are a disgrace to Asians and to never talk to or become friends with Japanese people like us. Like, lady, what the hell happened to you make you despise an entire country and anybody that is descended from it? I try my best to ignore and avoid Karen and instead focus on my own life. My wife and I work hard for everything we have and rarely get to buy anything extravagant. Even our car was extremely old and on its final legs for about 2 years before it finally broke down. We had been slowly putting money aside once we knew we would need a new car, and those 2 years gave us a nice amount to work with. I told my wife that she could pick anything she wanted, and before I knew it, we had a beautiful BMW parked in my driveway. My wife was so happy about finally getting to drive a nice car and not worry about the old one breaking down in the middle of the highway. I am the kind of husband that loves seeing my wife happy and would sacrifice everything just to see her smile. She works as a nurse in a hospital, and that means long hours, aching feet, and not the best pay. She spends her days taking care of everybody else, so I make sure that she has me to take care of her. Whether it be giving her a massage or letting her have the car of her dreams. Of course, the bliss was short-lived because Karen came by to check out the new car. Karen: "Oh, are you having visitors?" Me: "Oh no, we actually just bought this car to replace our old one." Karen: "You must be joking. There's no way that Japanese people can afford to have a car that nice." Me: "Well, we do, and maybe if you were not such a nasty person, you would get some good karma in life. Then maybe you will have nice things too." Karen: "I bet that you stole that car. I could call the police on you right now, but I might not. My son just turned 15 and needs to practice driving for his license. Let us take your car for a test drive and I might consider not calling the cops on you." Me: "First of all, it's not stolen, and second, you're out of your mind if you think we are letting you and your teenage son drive our brand new car. We both know you wouldn't give a damn if it got damaged. In fact, I would not be shocked if you crash it on purpose." Karen: "My son deserves to only drive the best cars. This is your last chance before I make sure you both get arrested for stealing that car. We both know that Japanese people are not as successful as Koreans, and I don't have a BMW." Me: "Well, maybe if your son was not a total brat and you paid more attention to your finances, you could have a car like this." Some might think that me calling her son a brat was a low blow, but listen. He is 15 and still cries to his mommy when he wants anything. He is spoiled and entitled, and I do blame Karen for this because she just rewards that behavior. He is the kind of person I have no idea what he will do when he gets a wake-up call that life is not exactly like that. Karen, meanwhile, was not happy about the things I said about her and her son. She again demands that I let them test drive the car, and I once again refuse. I know she has bad intentions, and I'm not stupid to let her go and act on them. What I expected was for her to act like a Karen and continue to whine and throw a fit. Maybe even take out a phone and start filming with lies that we had stolen the car from her and make us look bad or something. Hell, I wouldn't have put it past her to actually call the cops with her fake claim of the car not being ours. Instead though, she did something I never saw coming. She walked up to my wife and slapped her hard across the face. I'm talking, you could see the handprint hard. I don't want to go into detail since it's not my story to tell, but my wife did not have a great upbringing in life. It's one of the reasons that I want her to be so happy and I'm protective over her. Somebody, anybody, putting hands on my wife instantly brings out the worst in me. I slapped Karen so hard that she fell to the ground and I get right on top of her. I grabbed her by the shoulders and kept shaking and hitting her against the grass over and over again. The force from the ground knocks her out, and only when I notice that I do get off of her and tend to my wife. Her son is watching the entire thing in shock and has no idea what to do without his mom there to do it for him. I know exactly what I'm gonna do and call the cops to tell them that Karen physically assaulted my wife and I want her arrested. I was still angry when the police showed up, but had it pushed down inside. My wife was still not okay, and I knew seeing me angry in front of her would not help. I told the police everything that happened, and they went to the son for his side of the story. I think that he was terrified and had no idea what to do without his mom telling him. So he actually told the cops the truth, that they wanted to borrow the car, and I said no. Then the yelling and physical fight ensued. So now we had both sides even saying that Karen started it, so I knew she would be screwed. I pressed charges against her and was able to get her for both the assault and for a hate crime. She got arrested and sent to jail, while the son, I think, went to live somewhere with his father. I have no idea who he is, but I can only hope that he is a better parental figure than this Karen was. Karen did not understand why I was not the one getting arrested, because I was a man and Japanese, while she was a nice Korean woman that didn't do anything wrong in her mind. Her own son accidentally solidifying our case to send her to jail was just the best thing in my mind. She was angry and he looked kind of guilty. I'm so glad that she is gone and my wife can enjoy her car in peace without fear of Karen attacking her again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you like this story, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. The next one is titled Contractor Revenge. So this whole story takes place over the course of a year, approximately December 2016 into December 2017, and through March until this year. So the story begins with me needing to hire a contractor to repair damage to a pole barn that I was constructing on our property. The structure was partially done when a storm hit and the structure had substantial damage. So we bid a few contractors, and the guy that seemed to be the best one, who was actually a referral from a friend, we signed a contract and he started work within a week. We had also signed with him to complete the structure after the insurance portion was completed, because his crew could do this much more efficiently and a better job than we could do ourselves, which is what we were originally doing. His crew completes the insurance portion of the job but then abandons the project just before starting the rest of it. No call, no email, just nothing. I called and texted and not one of my contact points was ever returned. At this point, it was late December and we thought maybe he and his crew had holiday plans but would resume right afterwards. However, then another windstorm hit and his crew had not braced the partially completed structure correctly and it almost collapsed again. I tried for 2 weeks to find him. I even drove out to the address on the contract we signed, which ended up being a house on a rural road next town over. I knocked on the door, seeing his car there, but no one answered. I stopped by this house several different times trying to catch him. The last few times his car was no longer there, but the work truck of another company was. Wanting to know if he owned the house, I pulled up the tax records for it in the county it was in. Name on the house was not registered to him, so sounds like he rented or at least was staying with a friend. The company info on the truck was registered to someone unrelated and not on the tax records. The tax records showed that the actual taxpayer of the property lived elsewhere. Here where I live, the property owner name is listed, and if they don't actually live at that property, such as in using it for an investment, their address would have the actual tax bill sent to is also on there. Given that knowledge, I pulled the court records for him to see if maybe he had been recently arrested or if there was any other info. What I found was about 30 years of driving offenses, including a lot of DUI, DWI charges and other records. At this point, I figured he was long gone, and being as I hadn't paid out any money to him for work that was not complete, I would just move on. At least until the structural engineer I hired to assess the damage to the work that was done stated that the structure had to be started over on that part, and the building materials that the contractor had left scattered around the job site were also unusable due to being left improperly stored. I had hoped that the structure could just be pulled back into place and resecured, but I was told this is not the case. So began the bigger drama and my determination to find him. But well, so far his negligence has cost $1,200 for a structural engineer opinion, our insurance company paid for a second opinion because they didn't like what ours said, $2,500 for insurance deductible to the newest contractor hired to repair the exact damage that happened 3 months prior, and $7,000 in materials that his insurance company refused to cover or pay for, and my insurance policy on the project did not cover either. The adjuster for his insurance company said that he was able to locate the contractor but refused to give up any info for him directly. That and the fact that the project wasn't finished had detriment to my farm and boarding business because 2 of my pastures that were connected to where the building was sitting could not be used. This limited my ability to use natural pasture grass in summer months by rotating pastures for each herd, and had to purchase hay, which gets quite expensive. By the time the building was completed and I could get my pastures back to normal, I had losses of over $14,000. Because I did not know where he now lived, I used the only address I had for him to file for small claims court, which here has a limit of $15,000. The court documents I served came back undeliverable. This meant that I was kind of stuck because a court date cannot be scheduled until all parties are properly served. But how do I find an address for someone who does not seem to register to any particular address directly? Time was still on my side as this was still early mid last year, so I kept a watch on social media for anything with his name, which was a very unique one. If there was another man of the same name within this state within even the same metro area, it was unlikely because of how unique the name was. Then one day this past fall, after Google searching the name again, there it was, his Facebook page. His name had not shown up before on Facebook with several searches. Not sure why this was the case, but even better, all his settings were set to public. I could see everything he wrote about, including his recent commitment to stay sober earlier in 2017, just after he abandoned my project. And also his employer's name. He had posted a picture of him on a job site and someone asked where he worked now. He named the place, so a quick Google search and voila, got an address to serve him court papers too. So I refiled with the newfound address, but I still needed a home address to enforce the judgment once I won the case. So you're asking, what did I do now? Well, seeing that he was listed as single in his page, I used a fake FB profile that I originally had in use to test various features I enable on pages that I start up under my real profile. Truthfully, I only used that profile for that purpose to make sure the settings I put in place truly work, but now it would serve another purpose. Getting this guy to give me all the info I needed playing on his being middle-aged and single. To create my alter ego, I found a website of a cute blonde lady in her 40s, so as not to be too young for him, since he was around mid-40s himself, and just yanked pictures. I only set one to the profile photo and would use the rest if he asked for more. I changed all the pictures in the profile to look like it was a typical page of the average mid-40s female. Holy crap, did this work, and it worked so well. I used some information I found on his page to strike up a convo about stuff stolen out of his work truck in the alley behind his house. Big clue, and it was reported to the city police department. He named the city, so another big clue. So using this information and telling him I had grown up in the same area, I got him to give me a general area where he lived, keeping conversations cool like, is the pizza joint still there? They've been around forever, etc. so he wouldn't get suspicious. Thank goodness for Google Maps giving me a better idea of that area, so I could talk about it like I did in fact grow up there. In reality, I've only ever been in that city twice and other times drove through on the way to somewhere else. I was able to narrow down the area he talked about, and using that info, I pulled the police report records from that city. There were 3 reports done within the same area on that same day he reported. So using that info, I pulled the county tax records to see who owned the houses. I found 3 houses within that area that could possibly be rentals since the owner name and taxpayer billing address didn't match. This could be a long shot to find the person, but I didn't have anything to lose by searching. Just as I was about to call the homeowners to see if anyone by the name of the contractor rented from them, he posted some info on his page that made the calls completely unnecessary. He posted the name of his roommate in a status update, who I then check out the profile of. The profile lists the roommate landscaping business and a quick Google search of that business name, and bingo. His state business registration address matched one out of the 3 addresses I suspected to be the rental house. So now I have his home address, and he had already been served at his employer's address for the court date. Fast forward to the court date, he didn't show up, which I suspected he wouldn't, so I got default judgment. Between serving him papers and the court date passing, the FB profile I was using to talk to him was helpful in getting info out of him about his life, his job situation, how much he made per hour, me feigning knowledge about what construction trades paid, and the fact that he was looking at changing employers. He even told me the name of that employer, so I was armed with info should he decide to not work with me. He played right into my hands. Once I got the official judgment from the small claims court win, I decided to contact him myself on Facebook using Messenger. I sat down and wrote a whole paragraph to him, first typing it out on Word so that I could print it out and edit it, and having my husband read it as well. I wrote that while I was angry at him, I was gonna give him one chance to work a deal with me, and rather than using our State Department of Revenue play collection officer for me, I hate dealing with our State Department of Revenue. They make the IRS look like Sunday school teachers, but if it came down to that I would, and they would start garnishing his wages, and here they take 25% of each paycheck after taxes and have the person's employer do it for them and then send it to me. However, I hate letting the state be the middleman because they just complicate things. But I told him straight out that if he refused to work with me directly, I would go to that extreme. I told him that I know he is an addict and has had struggles in the past. I told him that knowing he has had struggles, I was willing to work with him directly and give him an opportunity to offer a monthly payment amount that works for him and his budget rather than have the state decide the amount for him. To shorten this up, he replied, agreed, signed and had notarized a monthly payment agreement, complete with a list of manual labor tasks that he could use in place of a payment or two to help with some projects on my farm. And the next one is a tree loss story. So first of all, here we can see the trees before the removal. In the next picture you can see the trees after their removal and notice that their trimmer blew through my hedge as well. And here you can see the view out of OP's bedroom window, which looks pretty empty. Here you can see a picture of the properties that are involved. And now let's get on to the story. By the way, the previous picture was a developer survey showing trees directly on the property line, however not all significant trees were depicted. So the story: I bought my house in part because it had a completely private backyard screened in by 50 to 60 foot tall Douglas firs and western red cedars running along the property line. There was a single house on the other side of the trees after their driveway, but it was otherwise basically a forest back there. About a year after I moved in, I came home at lunch to find almost half of the trees along my back property line had been torn down. Apparently, a developer had purchased that lot and was going to build a bunch of cookie-cutter townhomes, but they left the main house that was already there. I was pretty upset at that removal, but the developer gave me a survey excerpt that showed the remaining trees were situated directly upon the property line, and then professed that they only removed trees that were completely theirs. However, they lied. I was young and naive, so I took them at their word. After all, they would know what they were talking about, right? And I didn't want to make waves being new to the neighborhood, plus it allowed more sun to reach my backyard, so I let it go. Sadly, in WA, the statute of limitations for timber trespass is 3 years, so by the time I gained much of my knowledge in this area, it was too late to hold the developer accountable. Fast forward 4 years and I come home for lunch again and find my backyard trees being cut down again. Only this time I had the survey from the developer that clearly showed the trunks of the remaining trees that were directly on the property line. The trimmer was dropping branches into my yard and onto my shed, which damaged the gutter. I did not notice this until later. After getting some attitude from the tree trimmer, I asked him if he knew where the property line was. He didn't, and to go ahead and get the owner so we could have a chat. Then a lady comes out with a cell phone and the man on the line introduces himself as Jake. Name changed for the story, but it is important that he gave me a specific name. Jake says he is the owner and tells me that he wants to remove the trees and put up a fence, and that maybe he would plant some fruit trees on my land as recompensation. I tell him that the fence won't provide the same privacy that these 60-foot tall trees do, and I would like them to not be cut down. He informs me that he also bought the property just to my north and that he wanted to be a good neighbor and wanted me to be a good neighbor too, which I took as a veiled threat. I told him I had the developer's survey showing the trees were on the property line, so we should both agree what happens to them. He wanted me to wait so he could come back from wherever he was, but I had to get back to work, so I told him to stop cutting and we could discuss later that evening. He agreed and I left to go back to work. At some point he called me back, but I was at work, so I let it go to voicemail, where he confirmed we are to meet that evening to discuss what happens to the trees. My wife gets home later that day and sends me a text that guys are cutting the back trees down. Luckily it was close to the end of the day, so I sped home and told the trimmers in no uncertain terms to GTFO of my trees. While I was there, I met the HOA president. I did not know their development was part of a HOA until then, and he informed me he also told them not to cut down the trees. So Jake comes over later that evening and brings a younger man with him he only introduces as his nephew. I explained that in Washington state, trees that are directly on the property line are owned by both property owners as tenants in common and cannot be cut down without both owners' consent.
He takes a picture of the developer's survey and I tell him I need to get an arborist to figure out what damage has been done and how best to address it, and that the rest of the trees won't be coming down. I was still trying to be neighborly, so I did not bring up that he ignored our agreement to stop. I did say if he had come to me before, maybe we could have worked something out. He says he understands and they leave. In the interim, HOA president and I are texting and he gets super belligerent that I'm considering pursuing the neighbors for damages. He apparently thought I should just let them cut down the trees and be happy that they are building a nice fence. He asserts that I must be angling to sue the HOA, which I tell him makes zero sense because they are not the ones who authorized the cutting, and he tells me not to contact him anymore. Okay then, HOA president owns a car wash and has a bunch of reviews about how belligerent he is, which makes sense from my experience with the guy. So a couple days later, I get a letter from Jake's attorney stating I had given them permission to cut down the trees and therefore had no cause to ask them for damages, threatening all sorts of legal hell if I sue. Considering I had his voicemail confirming we were meeting later to discuss the trees, I felt pretty confident I could overcome this claim, but it was still enraging to have someone so blatantly lie like that. It also turns out that Jake was really named Harry and his nephew was the one named Jake. I guess Harry thought it was easier to pretend he was Jake when dealing with neighbors. I guess they are both on the property deed. I don't understand the logic, but it was at that point I realized they were all liars and there was no resolving the issue amicably, so I sued them for timber trespass. It took about 2 years, but their insurance eventually settled, albeit for not as much as I would have gotten if I had gone to trial, which I wish now I had. They lied and repeatedly changed their story during discovery. At one point they said their trimmer would attest that I told him to continue cutting instead of me giving Jake, aka Harry, permission like they originally claimed. But they were then unable to produce a statement from him. He noped the F out when I sued them, left his rigging gear on the trees and everything. I also found out they had multiple code violations for grading and building without permits, so they have a history of flouting the rules and don't seem to think the rules apply to them. Anyway, we signed a release for the damages and their insurance cut me a check. I figured the matter was closed and they understood the trees were co-owned and were not going to be cut down without my permission. Well, late last year I get a knock at my door. It's a process server and I am being sued for quiet title by Jake and Harry. Their complaint is from some no-name attorney and aside from not including the exhibits is vague, blatantly retaliatory and frivolous. It does not mention trees or the property line, just some language about how they think I'm going to make a claim to their property at some point in the future. So now I am pissed and the gloves are off. I pulled the paperwork for their development and found the landscape plans and tree inventory reports. Apparently, all new developments in our county are required to retain a certain number of trees for canopy coverage, and this requirement passes on to the property owners. So, these trees were specifically retained, placed in a private easement, and the plat map for the development states the trees shall be maintained and replaced if damaged. This same plat map says the HOA is responsible for stepping in if the individual owners don't replace the damaged trees too. Looking up the county codes confirm all of this. These trees were designated retained significant trees and cannot be removed without county authorization. If they are removed, the county is authorized to fine the property owner $5,000 per tree that was removed, and recall they removed 8 of them. So I filed a code violation and the county enforcement officer came out and took pictures. He sent them a warning notice saying they must replant the trees or face fines, and he also sent an email to the HOA saying if Jake and Harry don't act, they will come after the HOA to fix the issue. And oh, remember how Harry said he owned the property in front of me? Yeah, he rents that out, and while looking up his lawsuit against me, I found out he was evicting tenants. He filed a declaration with pictures of the inside showing he converted the downstairs of the home to an apartment complete with its own kitchen. Sure enough, he did not get any permits for this, and it was what the county ended up calling an illegal duplex conversion. Yeah, I turned him in for that and he had to gut the whole inside or again face fines. code enforcement guy also made him clean up the outside for being a junkyard. I got paid nicely for the trees they cut, and now they have to replant them. The remaining trees are not coming down, and they had to gut their illegal duplex. I have more info on them if they keep it up. It would be a shame if someone investigated their other tenant properties, because they are obviously slumlords. I'm considering letting an attorney go to town on them for their frivolous suit if they don't accept my offer to dismiss. They effed around and found out, don't mess with my trees.
And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.